Welcome to Xi Jinping Briefing. The content of the briefing includes wars, Trump's courtroom dramas and our new king, the world in 2023, the promise and peril of geopolitics. Taiwan investment in China plummets as it soars in US and Germany. China's PLA hails constructive US talks, but hits out at Pentagon budget. A grim year for the Chinese economy. Wars, Trump's courtroom dramas and our new king, the world in 2023. The Sydney Morning Herald. The year 2023 was filled with major stories and events from around the world. In North Asia, China struggled to re-engage with the world after lifting COVID restrictions, with its economy suffering and foreign investors hesitant to return. The Chinese government also faced challenges in repairing fractured ties with the United States and Australia. In Southeast Asia, there were political dynasties emerging in Indonesia and the Philippines, while Thailand experienced political drama and Malaysia saw stability under Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Timor-Leste sought to secure a deal with Australia, and armed ethnic groups in Myanmar captured military outposts. In Europe, Russia's notorious mercenary leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, staged a failed insurrection. The war in Ukraine continued to cast a shadow across Europe, leading to economic and political unrest. Far-right and populist forces gained traction in countries like Slovakia, Germany, and the Netherlands. In the Middle East, violence and conflict persisted in Israeli-occupied territories and the Gaza Strip, while Saudi Arabia continued its efforts to diversify its economy through sports and entertainment. The United Arab Emirates hosted the UN Climate Change Conference in Dubai. In North America, former U.S. President Donald Trump dominated the headlines despite facing numerous criminal charges. President Joe Biden faced political and domestic challenges, including partisan battles over aid to Ukraine and support for Israel. In South America, Brazil saw the inauguration of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and a Trumpian election in Argentina. The Venezuelan crisis continued, and violence marred elections in Ecuador and Peru. Africa experienced severe flooding and drought, coups in Niger and Gabon, and ongoing conflicts in Sudan and Ethiopia. In Oceania, New Zealand saw the resignation of its prime minister, a change in government, and a rise in crime. China's influence in the Pacific region also became a significant issue. The promise and peril of geopolitics. Foreign policy. Geopolitics is a distinctive intellectual approach to international relations that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. There are two traditions of geopolitics: the democratic tradition, represented by thinkers like Halford Mackinder, Alfred Thayer Mahan, and Nicholas Spickman, and the autocratic tradition, represented by individuals like Alexander Dugin. The democratic tradition aims to understand how liberal societies can thrive in a dangerous world, while the autocratic tradition seeks to establish an autocratic axis and a Eurasian empire. The autocratic tradition is currently being followed by leaders like Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Putin's neo-imperial program involves reclaiming former Soviet republics and building a bloc of Eurasian revisionists, while Xi's Belt and Road Initiative aims to wrap countries from Southeast Asia to Southern Europe in Chinese influence. Both leaders are seeking to establish an authoritarian pan-region, where autocracy is secure and democratic impulses are stifled. To counter this autocratic challenge, the democratic world needs to revive its own tradition of geopolitics. This involves understanding the importance of power politics, balancing early rather than late, forming alliances and security networks, and blending democratic solidarity with sordid compromises. It also requires recognizing that Eurasian struggles are not monodimensional or mono-regional affairs, and that containing Beijing's economic and technological influence is as important as checking its military power. Ultimately, a democratic geopolitics should aim to provide the security necessary for another era of creation and cooperation among the world's democracies. Taiwan investment in China plummets as it soars in US and Germany. Nikkei Asia. Taiwanese investment in China has dropped to its lowest level in decades, with just over 10% of the island's total outbound direct investment going to China in 2023. This is down from a peak of 84% in 2010 when Taiwan and China signed a free trade agreement. The drop-off is due to China's economic slowdown and the growing tensions between the two sides, as well as the friction between Washington and Beijing that has led to U.S. duties on Chinese goods. Taiwanese companies are also finding it harder to do business on the mainland. Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party administration, led by President Tsai Ing-wen, is seeking to reduce the island's economic dependence on China. China's PLA hails constructive U.S. talks, but hits out at Pentagon budget. South China Morning Post. The Chinese military has described last week's conversation between top Chinese and American military leaders as positive and constructive in restoring high-level dialogue between the two militaries. However, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, criticized Washington's new National Defense Authorization Act, accusing the U.S. of treating China as a military threat. The conversation between General Charles Brown, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, and his Chinese counterpart General Liu Zhenli was the first of its kind since Beijing cut off high-level military communications in protest at a visit to Taiwan by Nancy Pelosi, the then House Speaker. A grim year for the Chinese economy. Foreign policy. The Chinese economy has experienced a significant slowdown this year, following years of repression and a lack of public spending. Real estate giants have been on the brink of collapse throughout 2021, and even the Communist Party has reluctantly acknowledged the scale of the problems it faces. The economic crisis has impacted the Chinese public in a number of ways. For example, youth unemployment has reached high levels, leading to a generation of college graduates feeling disillusioned and resorting to working the bare minimum to survive. China's economic problems run deep, from sluggish consumption to a demographic crisis and a housing bubble. President Xi Jinping's policies are seen as having deepened these issues, focusing on top-down control rather than thoughtful reform. Defense spending has been a priority for the Chinese government, even as the economy suffers. However, some analysts remain optimistic about China's long-term prospects, pointing to the country's ability to ride out previous crises. China reaffirms its military threats against Taiwan weeks before the island's presidential election. Associated Press. China has threatened to use military force to annex Taiwan, ahead of the island's elections for president and legislature. Taiwan's 23 million people overwhelmingly favor maintaining the island's de facto independent status, leaving the polls to be decided largely by domestic concerns. Ruling party candidate William Lai holds a lead in most surveys, while main opposition Nationalist Party candidate Hou Yui has sought to appeal to voters who fear a military conflict with China. Taiwan has answered Chinese military expansions with boosts to its navy, air and ground forces, backed by the possibility of swift intervention by U.S. and allied forces in the Asia-Pacific. Xi Jinping says China's reunification of Taiwan inevitable. The Independent. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that China's reunification with Taiwan is inevitable. China considers Taiwan to be a part of its territory, even though it has never governed the island. Xi's comments come ahead of Taiwan's presidential election in January. The U.S. has an unofficial relationship with Taiwan, but follows a one-China policy and provides support for its defense. Tensions between China and Taiwan have increased in recent years, particularly since President Tsai Ing-wen strengthened ties with the U.S. China medical regulator suspends cosmetics imports from Japan's Hoya Kyoto. Yahoo! China's medical regulator has suspended imports from Japanese cosmetics company Hoya Co. after conducting an online inspection of its factory in Japan. Hoya Co. confirmed that the inspection had taken place but did not comment on whether imports had been suspended. China is Japan's biggest source of imports and its biggest export market. Imports from China totaled $198 billion last year, while exports to China were $145 billion. Moving, Bitcoin made Hindsight Capital's magnificent year gold. Bloomberg. Hindsight Capital LLC, a fictional investment firm, has made a series of trades that would have generated substantial profits in 2023. The firm uses a strategy of perfect foresight, making trades based on information available at the beginning of the year. One of the key trades involved investing in the Bloomberg Magnificent 7 Index, which consists of the world's largest tech companies, such as Alphabet, Amazon, and Apple. The index gained 107.3% in 2023. Hindsight Capital also profited from shorting the CSI 300 composite of mainland China stocks, which fell 16.6% during the year. Another successful trade involved shorting the TTF Netherlands natural gas contract, which fell 76% from its peak. Hindsight Capital made a profit of 52% on this trade. The firm also made money by investing in gold, which gained 12.5% in 2023, and by investing in companies exposed to nuclear power and clean energy, which gained 33.4% and 65% respectively. Finally, Hindsight Capital profited from investing in Bitcoin, which rose 163% in dollar terms, and from shorting palladium, which fell 33%. China's economy had a miserable year. 2024 might be even worse. CNN. The Chinese economy is facing a slowdown that could last for decades due to a combination of structural problems and worsening demographic trends. The country's growth rate is expected to fall below 5% this year, well below the pre-pandemic average of 6% or more. Without significant market reforms, China could become stuck in the so-called middle-income trap, in which emerging economies grow quickly but then struggle to reach high-income status. The slowdown is largely driven by the end of an unprecedented period of credit and investment expansion, which has left China's financial system unable to generate the same levels of credit growth as before. Beijing's zero-COVID policy and crackdown on private enterprise have also damaged confidence and hurt the economy. Consumer prices have been weak, the real estate crisis has deepened, and youth unemployment is a major problem. Foreign companies are pulling out of China, and foreign direct investment has turned negative for the first time since 1998. Demographic trends are also worrying, with China's population falling for the first time since 1961 and the fertility rate hitting a record low. In the 2040s, population contraction could make growth impossible without major policy changes. And that's a wrap on the major news stories of 2023. It's been a year filled with political dramas, economic struggles, and geopolitical tensions. Let's dive into some analysis and share my thoughts on these events. Starting with China, the country has faced numerous challenges this year. The Chinese economy has experienced a significant slowdown, with real estate giants on the brink of collapse and youth unemployment reaching high levels. President Xi Jinping's policies have been criticized for focusing on top-down control rather than thoughtful reform, exacerbating these economic issues. However, despite the challenges, some analysts remain optimistic about China's long-term prospects, pointing to its ability to ride out previous crises. Geopolitics has also been a major theme this year, with the autocratic tradition of geopolitics represented by leaders like Putin and Xi gaining traction. They seek to establish authoritarian pan-regions, where autocracy is secure and democratic impulses are stifled. In response, the democratic world needs to revive its own tradition of geopolitics, focusing on power politics, forming alliances, and checking Beijing's influence. It's a delicate balancing act, but crucial for the security and cooperation among democracies. On the Taiwan front, tensions have been escalating with China threatening to use military force to annex the island. Taiwan's upcoming elections will largely be decided by domestic concerns, but the possibility of a military conflict with China looms large. Taiwan has been boosting its military capabilities, with support from the US and allied forces in the Asia-Pacific. The situation remains tense, and it will be interesting to see how it unfolds. In terms of investments, Taiwanese companies have been reducing their investment in China due to the economic slowdown and growing tensions between the two sides. This is part of President Tsai Ing-wen's efforts to reduce Taiwan's economic dependence on China. Meanwhile, China's medical regulator has suspended imports from a Japanese cosmetics company after an inspection of its factory. This highlights the ongoing trade tensions between the two countries. Lastly, let's talk about a fictional investment firm, Hindsight Capital, which had a magnificent year with its trades based on perfect foresight. They profited from investments in tech companies, shorting Chinese stocks, gold, nuclear power, clean energy, and Bitcoin. While Hindsight Capital's success is fictional, it serves as a reminder of the importance of making informed investment decisions. Overall, 2023 has been a year of challenges and uncertainties. The world has seen economic struggles, geopolitical tensions, and trade disputes. It's essential for countries to navigate these complexities while prioritizing the well-being of their citizens and fostering cooperation among nations. As we move into 2024, it will be interesting to see how these stories develop and what new challenges and opportunities arise. Now, I'd love to hear from you, our viewers. What are your thoughts on these news stories? Do you have any questions or insights to share? Let's keep the discussion going. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.